Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, the ReliefFact.com studio inside the Beltway. Good morning to all of you across the United States. Good afternoon to those listening in the United Kingdom, because you know my guest is Matthew Elliott. Matthew Elliott, of course, was the chief executive of the Vote Leave campaign of more than 3 years ago. He's now editor-at-large of BrexitCentral.com, senior political advisor to Shore Capital. Good morning, Matthew. Thanks for joining me on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Good morning, Hugh. Thank you.
I met you once, and then we had a wonderful, spirited discussion at dinner. But since that time, I have been without a compass as to figuring out, and I've just been relying on the Telegraph, the Times of London, and the Guardian. What the hell is going on this week? Because I expected when Boris Johnson came back from Brussels with a deal, all of you would finally say, finally, let's move on with it. And yet you've got this nitwit Litwin doing crazy stuff. What is going on?
It's been a long process since the referendum, I tell you. So if you remember, back in the spring, Theresa May failed to get her deal through the House of Commons. Then there was a leadership election, and Theresa May was replaced by Boris Johnson as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom in July. He then went back to the EU to make some fundamental changes to the deal which she'd negotiated. And as you say, that was agreed last week with the EU. And everybody thought that on Saturday, with the House of Commons meeting for the first time on a Saturday since the 1980s, during the Falklands War, that would be the historic moment where there'd be a parliamentary majority for a Brexit deal. But Oliver Letwin, one of a former Conservative MP, put down a really crazy amendment, basically saying that the government shouldn't have this meaningful vote on the deal until they've fully passed the legislation for the deal. And that's really put a spanner in the works. So now it's really up in the air whether or not we'll be leaving on the 31st of October. There's still the parliamentary time to do so, but things, like I say, look up in the air.
Well, it's a drinking game if you were going to say spanner in the works, so we've already got that one checked off. I'm glad to hear it. But in terms of actually what happens next, they're meeting today, and they need a, quote, meaningful vote, close quote, which requires the consent of the speaker, if I've been following this correctly. And John Bercow isn't a nitwit. He's actually kind of a sinister figure in the destruction of British representative democracy, however buffoonish he might appear in the clips that we see. I know, as a lawyer, he's just departed from precedent after precedent. He's broken the speakership. Can it be repaired, and will he get out of the way or stay in the way today?
Well, John Bercow, as you say, is a very partisan speaker, and some people say that he sees it as his mission to derail Brexit. He has said that he's leaving on the 31st of October, and there's already a process in place to replace him as speaker, and that's going on at the moment. His big decision today is, does he allow the meaningful vote to take place? And most people guess that he won't, but he'll argue that it's actually a second vote. You can't have two votes in one session, which means that tomorrow what will probably happen is the second reading of the withdrawal agreement will take place. But the big problem is this, two problems. First of all, the programme motion that decides how quickly the bill can go through, that has to be really fast-forwarded to take place before the 31st. So will the House of Commons, with its majority, the inbuilt Remain majority, allow that fast-forwarded process? That's the first problem. Second problem, will there be any amendment? So there could be an amendment, for example, to have a second referendum confirming the country's support for the deal. Or, perhaps even more deadly, there could be an amendment for Britain to stay within the EU's customs union. And the big question is what the DUP, the Northern Irish Unionist Party, will do. And they feel very betrayed by Boris Johnson over the deal. They feel that his deal cuts off Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK. So will they try and side with Labour and support a customs union, which will really unravel the whole deal?
Now, the Benn Act, this audience knows that the Benn Act was the attempt by the Remain dead-enders to force Johnson to postpone leaving on October 31st. I have read closely the leaders of the EU, and among them, President Macron of France has said, we're not doing that. Can we trust anyone to veto an extension? Because once one member of the EU vetoes any idea of an extension, comes out and says it's not happening, I'm going to veto it, we'll be done with this nonsense because the Remainers will realize it's either Boris's deal or a hard Brexit. Is that a possibility?
One of the big changes in the past fortnight has been that the EU leaders are really sort of rallying to Boris's support. So at the end of last week, they were talking about how they might not allow an extension, and that allowed him to present MPs, or he wanted to present MPs with this choice between a no-deal Brexit or the deal which he had negotiated. The trouble is that some people don't believe the other EU leaders, that actually would the EU really veto an extension? And there's a general feeling that actually if push came to shove, they would actually allow an extension, a technical extension, if that was going to happen. And of course, the reason why the Benn Act was so deadly in September was because it meant that when Boris Johnson was doing his negotiations, he didn't have the power to walk away. And, as you know, in any negotiation, having that power to walk away from the deal is crucial to getting the deal you want. It's a bit like if you went into, to buy a car on a Saturday and you basically said to the car dealer, I'm going to walk away with that car at the end of the day, whatever price you ask for. You need that walk-away position to get a good deal, and that was taken away from Boris by the Benn Act.
There is a new government, for example, in Poland. It is a conservative government. Is there one government that, with an eye on the long-term leverage it gains within the EU or stature it gains with the United Kingdom, that will stand up and say, this far and no farther, not now, not tomorrow, not ever, will we support an extension? Is there just one government with a backbone over there to assist Boris in getting out, because everybody knows he got the best deal possible?
The general consensus seems to be that of the countries who might be considered to block an extension, and people talk about, as you're saying, Poland, some people talk about Hungary, for example, that, again, they wouldn't actually do so if the EU institutions wanted that extension to go through, because both of those countries are net beneficiaries from the EU. So they get more money from the EU than they put into the pot. But we really it's really a guessing game here. I wish I could tell you and your listeners with certainty what will happen and whether or not countries would veto it, because everybody's really guessing. But my hunch is that they wouldn't ultimately veto an extension.
Now, for the benefit of my audience, Matthew Elliott is the David Axelrod and the Karl Rove combined of the United Kingdom. That's what he does. He looks at, he studies. I have been watching this with amazement. This would actually realign politics in America. If a clear command, we don't do referenda here, but if a clear command of the American people to do A was passed 3 years ago and we got not A, politics would realign regardless of ideology over the insult delivered to ultimate sovereignty. It's the ultimate sovereignty that underscores the Constitution that motivated the Declaration of Independence from the mothership of the United Kingdom. Ultimate sovereignty is being trod upon every day. I get angry watching it. Are the people of Great Britain angry?
Oh, very much so. And what's really interesting now is if you poll the public feel more loyalty and more identity with how they voted in the referendum than their traditional party identity. So now how you voted in the referendum is culturally and politically more important to your party identity, and party politics are now much more fluid. There are many more swing voters and floating voters than there were previously. Now, one thing I'm really certain of is that when the election happens, and there will be an election before too long, I actually think that Boris will be rewarded for actually how hard he's fought for Brexit. So even if he doesn't manage to get it over the line on the 31st, and there's still a chance he could, but if he doesn't manage, he's tried hard enough, and he's had that battle with not only Parliament, but also the judiciary. You might have sort of seen the Supreme Court judgment earlier in this year in September, which went against him. He's fought with every fibre in his being to get Brexit through. And conversely, the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats and the SNP, the opposition parties, they've been trying to thwart Brexit, and they will be, many of them, particularly the Labour Party, they will be punished over their undemocratic stance, not recognising what happened in the referendum. So I've got a feeling that actually what I thought would happen after the referendum was sort of bounce to the Conservatives in the election afterwards will actually happen this time round. So hopefully we'll be in a situation by early next year where the Brexit deal's gone through, we have a majority Conservative government with a majority House of Commons, and then actually they can get on to working out our post-Brexit future and how we can really be, a friend of the EU and a partner of the EU and trading with them, but also a global player wanting to do trade deals across the world. I very much hope that one of the first trade deals is with the United States.
Now, the way I prepare to talk to you is not only reading my British papers, I also rewatched Brexit, the movie, the HBO movie. You're played in that by John Heffernan. I don't know if you like the portrayal that John Heffernan did, but there's one scene where you and the fellow playing Dominic and a member of Parliament go out to a rather depressed area of Great Britain where the MP says, I've never been here before. Those people, those forgotten people of Britain that powered the Trump election in the United States, the forgotten people of the United States, and the forgotten, are they still active? Are they still following this? And are they disgusted with the Remainers?
They are still very active. Just first, one thing, for people who've seen the movie, the MP who's portrayed there, Douglas Carswell, he was actually one of the best MPs around, and he definitely would have been in touch with those people. So there's a bit of dramatic license there. But you're absolutely right.
I assumed.
Those voters are still very much around. And what's interesting is the level of political awareness now. You have sort of bizarre scenes that when big parliamentary debates are happening and votes are happening, you could walk into a pub or a cafe, and you see people sitting around looking at their smartphones, watching the Parliament Live channel, and actually seeing what the vote is going to be. And I just can't remember that in my all the sort of 20 years plus I've been working in politics. I've never seen that before. So people are very alive to what's going on in politics and following it very, very closely. So I think that when the next election happens, those people who came out to vote, some of them for the very first time, to vote Leave, they will also be active in the next election.
If you can get to a clean vote and a significant vote, how many members of Labor from Leave constituencies will honor their constituencies and vote Leave, vote for the Boris Johnson deal? Are we at 15? Are we at 8? Are we at 25? Because I think it's political suicide to delay this way, but maybe they're counting on confusing the dummies back at home.
If you look at there are about 25 Labour MPs who have voted with the government at one time or another on Brexit. So that could have been under Theresa May's administration or under Boris Johnson's current administration. So there's a pool of about 25 Labour MPs. Of course, some of them want something very different to some of the Conservative Eurosceptics. So some of them basically want a deal but want more of a customs union agreement, for example. So they might be peeled off by different amendments. But I think that they are in that position where they're making a choice between their constituents and what they said in very Leave-dominated areas versus what their party leadership is saying. But the crucial point is this, that whereas Jeremy Corbyn was quite popular around the time of the 2017 general election, surprisingly so, his popularity is now way down, and there are many MPs in the Labour Party who are very disillusioned with his leadership, and he hasn't been very strong, for example, on stamping out anti-Semitism within the Labour Party. He hasn't shown any leadership in that respect, and also been quite indecisive as a leader, so he hasn't come out, he hasn't recognised the Brexit referendum result. So really, by voting with the government to get a Brexit deal through, those Labour MPs are not only making sure Brexit happens and delivering on what their voters want, but also bringing forward the day when Jeremy Corbyn goes, and from their point of view, the ability to rebuild the Labour Party.
So let me conclude by telling you what my nightmare is that there have been periods in British electoral history when Lord Wellington was Prime Minister, when Lord Melbourne was Prime Minister. We're going way back here, where minority governments were allowed to endure for a long time because it was to the political advantage of their opponents not to take power. I am afraid that Labor, along with the DUP, along with the Conservatives from whom the whip have been withdrawn, that it's in their interest to drag this on as long as possible so that people will lose faith in democracy and simply walk away from politics, and that they will play this game of leaving Boris in power but without the ability to pass anything. Does that concern you, Matthew Elliott?
That concerns me very much, and that would be truly awful outcome from the next few weeks, but that really is a possibility. I hope that the opposition MPs will be alive enough to what their constituents want, which is basically a resolution of Brexit and an early election. And also, Jeremy Corbyn has said himself that once a no-deal Brexit has been ruled out, once this extension happens, he wants the general election to take place. But if he broke his promise there, he wouldn't be the first politician in the history of mankind to have broken a promise, of course. But I think that if he did break that promise, the pent-up frustration of the British people would really start to boil over. We're quite calm as a nation, generally speaking. We don't go into huge revolutions or anything like that. But really, he will be pushing things too far. So in the sense, the longer he leaves it, the more he will plummet in the polls. Labour's already at a historic low, about sort of 22% in the polls. He would see his poll numbers fall even further down from that. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen, but like I say, he wouldn't be the first politician to break his promise.
Last question, Matthew Elliott. Will you be involved with Dominic Cumming in any Tory campaign led by Boris Johnson?
I'm always happy to do my bit for the party. I worked very closely with Sajid Javid, the current Chancellor, the Finance Minister of the UK, on his leadership campaign. I do my bit for the party at all times. And one person who's come out of this really well is, as you say, Dominic Cummings, who's the PM's chief advisor.
Yes, he has. We need more of you and more of him in the United States, people who are unafraid to speak their mind clearly on television, regardless of that. Matthew Elliott, thank you. Please come back often and keep us up to date on everything going on in Brexit.
Thank you.